Gudrid took the brooch in her quivering hand. She grasped it lightly, as if it were a sliver of the most delicate glass. Its beauty made her entire body quiver with unnamed feelings that she'd not felt since her second husband was alive. She recognized the weight of the gold, but the sparkling frontal design looked as if a weaver's hand and not a skilled jewelry maker had intricately sewn its face. The light hit the ornament at different angles, and it radiated yellow and silver light that skipped across the brooch as if the craftsman had intentionally set in motion a flat stone across the still surface of a pond. On closer inspection, she thought she saw the Trinity symbol of the powerful European church. In the three-pronged center of the brooch lay a raised, clover-shaped design, accented with a silver outline. She suspected that Thorfinn had not noticed this. His allegiance to the Norse gods would not allow him to spend any amount of money on something with the slightest hint of a Christian symbol. In the presence of this precious gift, Gudrid's belief remained in the middle. She could not quickly dismiss the cultural and religious beliefs she'd grown up with. They were too well ingrained in her heart and mind. However, she welcomed the wealth and prosperity that the monotheistic religion brought. It was moving across her lands like the locust swarms that descended almost every 10 to 12 years on her country. Her people would no longer need to plunder foreign lands. Groenlandia could trade under the prosperous banner of the faith. "It's stunning, Thorfinn. Thank you. I shall wear it with my cape," she said, pinning it on the neck of her cape. "My neighbors will think that I found the treasure room at Uppsala." "All the treasure rooms of Uppsala could not outweigh the treasure of your beauty," Thorfinn said. "It transcends anything from that sacred place." Gudrid felt herself blushing. She could like the tone of a merchant's voice rather than the gruff and unfeeling sound of an explorer like Thorvald. At least Thorfinn would be at home more often, and for longer periods than her second husband. Merchants dealt in commerce and so could understand the importance of negotiation. She had lived alone long enough, and by the spectacular gifts she had just received, she knew he loved her. "You are too kind, Thorfinn," Gudrid said as she allowed a pleasant shiver to pass through her body. "Would you like to take a walk with me, Gudrid?" Thorfinn asked, extending his large hand. "Yes, I would." They walked out into the chilly air of Groenlandia night, and stood in front of Brattahlid, the dwelling of Eric the Red. They looked out over the tundra at the mountains of ice drifting on the shiny blackness of the Groenlandia sea. The crescent moon nestled in the sky. The still evening mirrored the peaceful silence she felt in her heart. It was as if the entire land had stopped for them. Gudrid touched her brooch and smiled at Thorfinn. He smiled back. "You're welcome," he said, knowing what was on her mind. "The brooch looks stunning on you. Or should I say your beauty makes the brooch look stunning." "How did you know what I was thinking?" she asked, surprised at his accuracy. "I don't know. I suppose right now our hearts are saying the same thing." She intertwined her fingers with his and grasped his hand tighter as they walked out into the grassy tundra, heading for the water. "Too bad the moon isn't full," Thorfinn commented. "We don't really need the moon, Thorfinn. We're the ones who give the moon its mystique." "You're a poet," he laughed. Again she felt her cheeks heat. "Honestly, Thorfinn, I don't know where these words are coming from. I think you're bringing them out of me." "The only thing I know is commerce and negotiation," he said. "I don't think it's me. It's probably Freya," he laughed. Frey and Freya could not be happier than the two of them were tonight, she thought, while honoring the two gods for their blessings. "Leif told me that the Eriksson family adopted you into their family when your husbands died," Thorfinn said. "Yes, I married two brothers in the Eriksson family. My first husband was Thorvald, who died from a native attack on Markland. They buried him there at a place he named Kalarnes. Soon after that I married his brother, Thorstein. He died of a strange illness that struck his crew after they returned home from another voyage to Vinland." They were silent for a moment. Then Thorfinn asked, "Gudrid, what would you like to see yourself doing in 2 years from now?" Gudrid stared at the white mountains floating by. "I think I'd like to travel, then start a family. I was unable to do these things with Thorvald. We married at a very young age, and he was too eager to follow his family and to make a name for himself. I like living in Groenlandia," she said, hearing her voice in harmony with the sound of the surf. "Where would you like to travel?" Thorfinn asked. I think I would like to see Vinland and Markland again, someday. It is as though you are looking into my thoughts. Earlier I was talking with Eric and Leif about using their settlement at Vinland. I plan to make a trip there later in the year, Thorfinn said. He found Gudrid's hand without taking his eyes off the water. Let's just stand here and quietly watch the world together. It was Gudrid's turn to smile. She knew in her heart that she had found the man she would marry. His touch told her. Her heart and mind were devoid of every other emotion but love for him. Tell me more about you, Thorfinn, she said. There isn't much to tell, he replied. Most of my time I spend scouting the ocean for raw materials for trade and business opportunities. I have never been married, for no reason other than being so busy traveling. Yes, you are young, Gudrid said, nodding. My life has been so full. I feel middle-aged, but I'm only in my early 30s, he agreed. If I were to die tomorrow, I think I could say that I'm fulfilled. I've been blessed with the ability to make money. I think I can see in you the potential to fulfill a great many things. He looked at her. Do you have the sight? Gudrid hesitated. I have been told that. I sometimes see things that come to pass, and I have had visions that no one else sees. Up to this moment she had only told her family. No one else knew about these powers of seeing. She felt that Thorfinn needed to know, and that she could trust him. They walked in silence, then stopped a foot away from where the stony shore met the water. They just stood there, looking out at the cold, windy night, and Gudrid had wrapped her arms around Thorfinn's arm and moved close against him for warmth. With a smile, Gudrid again wrapped the brooch in its square of leather and tucked it into her pack. To remind me while we're apart, she thought. She lifted the small bag of her belongings and exited the longhouse. Her mind turned to events even further in her past with her and Thorfinn's courtship. Thorfinn stood in the knee-deep, high wisps of grass blowing in the breeze. He watched Jarlabank and the other men loading supplies into the Ragnarok as it bobbed on the lapping waves. The boat that Eric's last expedition had left at the Vinland settlement was aptly named for its short excursion capability. Crossing the misty water to Markland was as far as it could safely go. This was not a good day for him. He feared for Gudrid's safety. Thorfinn didn't consider himself a fighter, except in necessary and desperate situations. He thought himself a brave man, but when love was concerned, fear turned every person into a coward. Gudrid was a strong woman, but the sheer number of scrawlings and the dubious relationship that his people had with them scared Thorfinn. He wanted to promote good relations with the natives of this land, but their first encounter with the native delegation had been a failure. If they were to coexist successfully, then his people and the scrawlings needed to discuss and agree upon rules. In his peripheral vision, Thorfinn saw another member of the team approaching the boat. He turned his head to see Adam tramping through the grass. "Adam," Thorfinn yelled and moved to intercept him. "I have one final question for you. Do you have a problem with taking orders from Gudrid?" he challenged. "No," Adam blurted. "Our virgin—" "Good," Thorfinn interrupted. "Other than myself, she is the only member of this crew that I trust." Without another word, Thorfinn walked to the boat. By this time, Tostig and the 3 warrior escorts for the expedition had loaded their belongings onto the craft. "I hold the 4 of you responsible for the safe return of my wife." Tostig glanced at the men next to him, then spoke for all of them. "We'll bring her back safely, Thorfinn. You have my word." Thorfinn placed his hand on Tostig's shoulder, knowing the importance of his wife's safety was now Tostig's priority. Tostig and the warrior escorts turned as Freydis joined them. She slung her own pack into the boat, then stepped aside to allow Jarlabank access. Thorfinn eyed the Nar. Even though the Ragnarok had enough places for 6 rowers and 6 passengers, with the supplies piled up at either end of the boat, it would barely accommodate everyone. "Be careful with that," Adam growled from behind Jarlabank as the servant clumsily dropped a wooden case into the boat. "It's delicate. Important." Thorfinn caught a whiff of yeasty breath. That and his slurred speech told Thorfinn that the monk was either drunk or hung over. No wonder Jarlabank scrambled to comply. He didn't want to give the monk an opportunity for any alcohol-induced aggression. Jarlabank was working for his freedom. His grandfather had been captured at Walcheren after seeing a great heavenly fireball streaking through the night sky, a bad omen. Soon after Jarlebank's grandfather spotted the object, he was captured and sold into slavery. Thorfinn hadn't told Jarlebank when he would release him, but he figured that in 6 more full moons, Jarlebank would have paid him off in full. Thorfinn looked into Jarlebank's face, too weathered for a man of his young age, and wondered what he would do once free. What line of work would suit him best? A farmer, Thorfinn guessed. Here in this new world any freed man with ambition might even surpass the wealth of his master. Jarlebank's land holdings would increase. His offspring would own a district and would divide and lease out the land, and his family name would go on for 1,000 years. Gudrid exited the longhouse. She carried a small bag. Thorfinn moved forward and stood between her and the boat, waiting to spend a moment alone with her to say goodbye. He started missing her already. Their life together up until now seemed all too short. It was really not that long ago, he thought with a smile, that I was sleepless in the terror of asking her to share my life. Thorfinn's chest had heaved and the cold morning air felt as if it held 2 pounding hearts as he knocked on Eric's door. The sun had just peeked over the horizon. His focus was not on the time of day, but on Gudrid. He tossed and turned on his bed for most of the night, only to finally drift off from exhaustion 3 hours earlier. The morning chill penetrated his thinly layered tunics. In the rush to dress before he lost his nerve, he'd not paid attention to what he threw on. The wooden door rattled with Thorfinn's second pounding. He had half a mind to open the door and let himself in, but he knew such behavior would be unforgivable. Perhaps Eric was in his field. Thorfinn's answer came with the sound of a latch being tripped on the other side of the door. It creaked open. "Thorfinn," Gudrid said, sounding surprised to see him. "Hello, Gudrid," he answered. The fear of what he was about to do tugged at the tether that tied his courage to his heart and to Gudrid. "Is Eric at home?" "Yes, he went out to the field just—" Thorfinn didn't wait for the rest of her sentence. He feared that if he stayed and talked to her any longer, he would run in the opposite direction from Eric and never see either one of them again. He started up the hill, where he saw Eric talking to one of his bondsmen. Eric was known as a fair and lenient landowner. His tenants praised him, as they once did his father, as an honest man. Both lived by and taught a strong code of ethics. Eric stared past his man when he saw Thorfinn running up the grassy hill. He put his hand on the bondsman's shoulder, indicating that the meeting was over, and they parted. He met Thorfinn halfway down the hill. Thorfinn stumbled to a halt, wheezing heavily. "Catch your breath, my friend," Eric said, and smiled knowingly. "Eric, I must speak with you." Eric remained silent. "I cannot tell you how the past several Viknatil. I've been overjoyed and tortured," Thorfinn said, unable to look his friend in the face. "I am—" Thorfinn gasped. I'm in love with Gudrid." He felt as if he was the first man to ever say those words. "This is very hard to say, and embarrassing for a man of my stature and place in society." Eric laughed. "Thorfinn, I know. We have all been shamed to think that our feelings are weaknesses, but believe me when I tell you that it makes us warriors." Eric moved to grab Thorfinn's shoulders, but stopped as Thorfinn's hand went up, signaling that he was not finished. "I would like your permission to marry her." Eric laughed out loud. "Nothing could make me happier, but the decision to marry you is Gudrid's." Fear crept back into Thorfinn. The last thing he wanted to do was confront Gudrid in this condition. There was a moment when the 2 men didn't speak. The chaotic thoughts in Thorfinn's head amounted to a silence of an unusual kind. The sound of his name broke the silence. "Thorfinn!" a female voice called from behind him. "I will leave you 2 alone," Eric said. "No, wait, please," Thorfinn blurted. But Eric ignored his friend's words and ambled away, chuckling. Gudrid walked across the field to him. She looked so happy to see him. "Hello, Gudrid," he managed before his vocal cords clenched and further words were mired by a pasty tongue. "What brings you to Brattahlid so early in the day?" I needed to ask Eric something." "Oh," she said, sounding a little disappointed. "No, you," he stammered, noticing her disappointment. Gudrid, will you marry me?" Thorfinn blurted loudly. From the corner of his eye he saw Eric pause, though he didn't turn around. Gudrid's expression changed to horror. She stared at him a moment, then covered her face with her hands and ran screaming back to the house. Thorfinn whirled toward Eric, about to call him back, but saw that he was already running back to him. Their shocked eyes met. "Gudrid!" Eric yelled across the meadow. He started after her, leaving Thorfinn in his confusion and chagrin. Thorfinn slowly followed, his disappointment becoming a heavier and heavier burden to carry. He could not understand what in Odin's name should provoke such a response from her. Their relationship had been proceeding wonderfully, or perhaps it was only he who felt that way. Eric and Thorfinn burst into the house without so much as a knock on the door. Gudrid lifted puffy, reddened eyes to stare at Thorfinn. Then she leaned into Eric's waiting arms and buried her face against his chest. "Gudrid, my love, what did I say that was so wrong?" Thorfinn begged. Her crying subsided momentarily. Through her sniffles she managed to say, "Oh, it's nothing you said or did, Thorfinn. It's just that Torvald and Thorstein died in Markland and Vinland, and I am afraid that the same will happen to you. I fear this is some ancient curse on my family playing itself out." "Oh, Gudrid, I promise you that nothing will happen to me," he said, opening his arms and beckoning her to enter them. Gudrid moved to Thorfinn and hugged him. "It's not a curse that brought you to me, Gudrid. It is a blessing," he said. Eric left the house, leaving them alone in their embrace. Gudrid stopped before him, her eyes fixed on Thorfinn's, her gaze the sun that lit up the darkest regions of his soul. "So you're all set," he said, hoping she would say no so that they could spend a little more time together. "Yes," she hesitated. "Well, I have to go. They're waiting." "I know. Here, take this." He untied Thor's hammer from around his neck and put it around Gudrid's. "Thor will watch over you and the people with you." She smiled. "What about Adam's god?" "Adam can take his chances with his own god," he said, half joking. Gudrid laughed and quickly kissed him, as if fearing that she'd change her mind and stay on Vinland with them. Thorfinn's hand barely brushed Gudrid's shoulder as she turned away. "See you in 10 dogers," she said over her shoulder. "I love you, Thorfinn." The crew pushed the Nar off the stony beach. A wave captured the Ragnarok and pulled it away from the land. The crew looked back at Thorfinn and the few others who had paused in their work to silently watch the parting or wave a goodbye, but Thorfinn was not looking at them. His focus remained on his beloved. Gudrid hugged a fur throw closer to her body. The cold Atlantic wind tugged at her long, curly hair, just as it teased at the long grass in the meadow. Its rustling blanketed every other sound. Thorfinn used all of his willpower not to let a tear drip from his eye, but the cold North Atlantic wind blew in his face and managed to force one out of him. He remained there till he could only imagine her sitting in that boat. "Damn wind," he whispered, wiping the tear from his cheek.